Hello there, and welcome back to Sleepy Tin Foil Hat. Tonight we're going to drift into a subject that most people think they understand, yet the deeper you look, the stranger it becomes. Something that exists inside every one of us, something that has shaped history, medicine, war, survival, and even some of the strangest theories ever whispered in quiet corners of science. We're going to slowly explore the hidden stories behind blood types, not just what they are, but why they exist, why they are different, and why some researchers believe the truth about them might go much deeper than we're usually told. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Let your shoulders drop, let your breathing slow down, and let your mind loosen its grip on the day. These stories aren't meant to rush you. They're meant to carry you gently, one idea at a time, until the edges of your thoughts start to soften. And if you enjoy these late-night journeys into strange science, hidden history, and quiet conspiracy theories, make sure to subscribe to Sleepy Tin Foil Hat and leave a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from tonight. I always like seeing how far these sleepy signals travel. It's strangely comforting to know that while we sit here in the dark, people all over the planet are listening to the same story, letting the same words drift through their thoughts. Now, let's begin. Most people learn about blood types in school in a very simple way. You are told that there are a few main groups, A, B, AB, and O, and that they matter when doctors need to give someone a transfusion. It sounds straightforward, almost mechanical, like labeling parts in a system. But the truth is that blood types are one of the most mysterious biological differences humans have, and scientists still don't fully understand why these differences exist at all. If blood is supposed to keep us alive, why isn't it the same in everyone? That question alone has puzzled researchers for more than 100 years. When blood types were first discovered in the early 1900s, the discovery itself came from a problem doctors couldn't explain. Sometimes transfusions saved lives, and sometimes they killed people almost instantly, even when everything seemed correct. The same procedure, the same method, but completely different results. It was as if the body could tell the difference between one person's blood and another's, and sometimes it reacted violently. Eventually, scientists realized that blood wasn't identical between individuals. It carried tiny markers on the surface of red blood cells, invisible to the eye, but extremely important to the immune system. These markers are what we now call blood types. They act like identification tags, signals that tell the body what belongs and what doesn't. If the wrong blood enters the body, the immune system can react as if it's under attack, and the reaction can be fast, faster than most people would expect. But what made the discovery even stranger was that these markers didn't seem random. They followed patterns that appeared again and again across families, across populations, and across entire regions of the world. Certain blood types were more common in some places than others, and the differences were too consistent to be accidental. It started to look less like a simple biological detail and more like a hidden system that had been shaping humanity for thousands of years. As scientists kept studying blood types, they found something even more surprising. The differences weren't just about transfusions. Blood types seemed to affect how people reacted to diseases, how their bodies handled certain infections, and even how likely they were to survive certain illnesses. Some viruses attacked people with one blood type more easily than others. Some bacteria seemed to prefer certain groups, and some populations appeared to have survived ancient epidemics better, possibly because of the blood types they carried. That raised a strange possibility. Maybe blood types weren't just differences. Maybe they were adaptations, changes that happened over time as humans spread across the planet, facing different environments, different foods, and different diseases. If that idea is true, then blood types could be like a record written inside the body, a record of everything humanity has survived. And that thought leads to an even stranger question. If blood types changed in the past, Could they still be changing now? To understand why that question matters, we need to go back to the beginning, to the moment when scientists first realized that human blood was not one single thing, but several different kinds living side by side. The discovery came from careful experiments, the kind that look simple when you read about them now, but at the time felt almost unbelievable. When researchers mixed small samples of blood from different people, they noticed something strange. Sometimes the cells stayed separate, floating normally. Other times, the cells clumped together, sticking in thick clusters like tiny grains pulled by an invisible force. Those clumps were the clue. They showed that the body could recognize blood that didn't match its own. It meant the immune system was watching even when we didn't realize it. And it meant the body had rules that no one had known existed. Once scientists started looking closer, they realized those rules were based on tiny molecules on the surface of red blood cells. These molecules are what define whether someone is type A, type B, type AB, or type O. Each type carries a different combination of markers, and the immune system is trained from birth to recognize its own set. Anything else can be treated as an intruder. That alone would have been enough to make blood types interesting. But the deeper researchers looked, the less it felt like a simple classification, and the more it felt like a puzzle that connected biology, history, and evolution in ways that no one expected. For example, type O is the most common blood type in the world today, but it isn't evenly spread. Some regions have much higher percentages than others. In parts of South America, type O is extremely common, far more than in Europe or Asia. In certain areas of Central Asia, type B appears more often than anywhere else. Type A is common in some populations, rare in others. These patterns don't happen by accident. They suggest that something in the past favored certain blood types over others, something that made survival easier for some groups and harder for others. One theory is that blood types changed as humans moved into new environments. When people began farming instead of hunting, their diets changed. When they moved into crowded settlements, diseases spread more easily. When they traveled into colder or hotter climates, the body had to adapt in ways that weren't always obvious. Over thousands of years, small differences could have made a big impact. A blood type that gave even a slight advantage during an epidemic might become more common in the next generation. A blood type that made someone more vulnerable might slowly disappear in certain regions. If that's true, then blood types aren't just medical labels. They're part of the story of how humans survived. And that story gets even more mysterious when scientists look beyond the four main groups most people know about. Because A, B, AB, and O are only the beginning. There are actually dozens of blood group systems, each with its own markers, each with its own rules, and many of them are still not fully understood. Some are so rare that only a handful of people in the world have them. Some are so unusual that doctors have trouble finding compatible blood, even in large hospitals. And some are so strange that they make researchers wonder if the history of human blood is more complicated than anyone expected. As we keep going, we're going to move deeper into those hidden details, into the rare blood types, the unusual patterns, and the theories that try to explain why these differences exist at all. Because once you start looking closely at blood, it stops feeling like something ordinary. It starts to feel like a code written inside every person, a code that might carry clues about where we came from, what we survived, and why humans are not as identical as we often assume. And the deeper we go, the stranger the story becomes. When scientists realized that the simple A, B, and O system was only the surface of something much larger, the study of blood types slowly changed from basic medicine into something closer to detective work. Every new discovery raised more questions than answers, and the deeper researchers looked, the more complicated the picture became. What first seemed like a neat, orderly classification started to look like a tangled history written in biology itself. One of the first surprises was that the ABO system is not the only way blood can differ between people. In fact, there are many other markers on red blood cells, each one part of a different blood group system. Some of these systems matter less for everyday transfusions, but they still exist and they still follow their own rules. Scientists have identified dozens of them, with names that most people never hear about, like Kell, Duffy, Kidd, and Lutheran. Each of these represents a small variation in the structure of blood, tiny differences that the immune system can detect with incredible precision. At first, these extra blood groups seemed like minor details, useful only for specialists, but over time, patterns started to appear. Certain rare blood types showed up more often in specific populations. Some were connected to resistance against certain diseases. Others seemed to have appeared only recently in human history, while some looked ancient, as if they had been carried for tens of thousands of years. That raised a strange possibility. Blood types might not just be medical information. They might be clues about where humans came from and how different groups survived different challenges over time. To understand why that idea matters, you have to remember that for most of human history, survival was uncertain. Long before modern medicine, before vaccines, before antibiotics, people lived in a world where disease could wipe out entire villages without warning. In those conditions, even small biological differences could mean the difference between life and death. If one blood type gave even a tiny advantage during an epidemic, that advantage could slowly change the balance of an entire population. Over generations, the people who survived passed their blood type to their children, and the ones who didn't. This kind of slow change is exactly how evolution works. But when you look at blood types, the patterns sometimes feel almost too precise, as if something was guiding the process more carefully than random chance alone. Take the example of the Duffy blood group, one of the lesser-known systems that most people never hear about. Scientists noticed that in many parts of Africa, a large number of people have a version of this blood group that makes them resistant to a certain type of malaria. The parasite that causes the disease normally enters red blood cells using a specific receptor, but in people with this variation, that receptor is missing. The parasite can't get in, and that means the disease has a harder time spreading. Over time, this protective version became very common in regions where malaria was a constant threat. It wasn't because anyone planned it. It was simply that the people who had that trait were more likely to survive and pass it on. But when you see patterns like that again and again, in different places, with different diseases, it starts to feel like blood is more than just a fluid. It starts to feel like a record of everything humanity has fought against. Another example comes from the ABO system itself. Researchers noticed that certain blood types seem to be more vulnerable to some infections and less vulnerable to others. Type O, for example, appears to offer some protection against severe malaria, but it may make people more susceptible to certain stomach infections. Type A has been linked in some studies to different responses to viruses, while Type B shows its own unique patterns. None of these effects are simple, and they don't guarantee anything for an individual person. But across large populations, the differences are clear enough that scientists take them seriously. And once you accept that blood type can influence survival, you start to see history in a different way. Every epidemic, every migration, every change in lifestyle could have left a mark in human blood. Even something as simple as the shift from hunting and gathering to farming might have changed which blood types became more common. When humans lived in small groups, diseases had a harder time spreading. But once people began living in villages and cities, infections could move quickly from person to person. In that kind of environment, the immune system mattered more than ever. A small advantage could mean everything. Some researchers believe this is one reason Type A became more common in populations that adopted agriculture earlier. The theory suggests that crowded living conditions created new disease pressures, and certain blood types handled those pressures better than others. It's not a perfect explanation, but it fits the idea that blood types reflect the environments our ancestors lived in. And that idea leads to one of the more unusual theories about blood types, a theory that has never been fully proven, but also never completely dismissed. The theory is that blood types might represent different stages of human evolution, not in the sense of one being better than another, but in the sense that they appeared at different times, as humans changed and adapted to new conditions. Some researchers have suggested that type O may be the oldest, because it appears in many populations around the world and seems to be connected to early hunter-gatherer groups. Type A may have appeared later, possibly as humans settled into farming communities. Type B has a different distribution, showing up more often in parts of Asia and Central Europe, which has led to speculation that it developed under different environmental pressures. These ideas are still debated, and science doesn't have all the answers. But the patterns are real, and they keep scientists asking the same question over and over again. Why does human blood have so many variations? If one system worked, why didn't evolution settle on a single type? One possibility is that diversity itself is the advantage. If everyone had identical blood, a single disease could affect everyone the same way. But with different blood types, a disease that harms one group might leave another less affected. In that sense, variation becomes a kind of protection for the species as a whole. It's like spreading risk across the population. And that idea makes blood types feel less like accidents and more like part of a larger design, even if that design came from natural processes rather than intention. But there are some blood types that don't fit easily into this explanation, and those are the ones that make the story even stranger. Some people have blood so rare that only a few individuals on Earth share it. In certain cases, doctors have found patients whose blood doesn't match any of the common groups, not even the rarer ones. These cases are extremely uncommon, but they exist, and when they appear, they remind scientists that the human body still holds mysteries we don't fully understand. One of the rarest examples is something known as Rh null blood. Most people have either the Rh positive or Rh negative factor, which is another marker on red blood cells that doctors check before transfusions. But a tiny number of people have neither. Their blood lacks the Rh markers entirely, which makes it compatible with many different types, but also makes it difficult for them to receive blood from others. Because of that, Rh null blood is sometimes called golden blood, not because of its color, but because of how rare it is. Only a few dozen people in the world are known to have it. Cases like that make scientists wonder how these variations appeared in the first place. Did they develop slowly over time, like other traits? Or did they come from mutations that happened unexpectedly, creating new versions of blood that had never existed before? Mutations are a normal part of biology, but when you look at something as complex as blood, the idea that new types can appear at all starts to feel almost unbelievable. It means the system is still changing, still evolving, still writing new variations into the human story. And that idea leads to another question, one that sounds simple, but turns out to be surprisingly difficult to answer. Why does the immune system care so much about blood in the first place? Why does it react so strongly to something as small as a molecular marker on the surface of a cell? To understand that, we have to look at the immune system itself and the way it decides what belongs inside the body and what doesn't. Because once you see how strict those rules are, the existence of different blood types starts to feel less like a detail and more like a hidden language the body has been speaking all along. The immune system is often described as a defense mechanism, but that description doesn't fully capture how complex it really is. It doesn't just fight off viruses and bacteria. It constantly scans the body, checking every cell, every molecule, every signal, looking for anything that seems unfamiliar. Most of the time, this happens quietly, without us noticing. But the system is always working, always comparing what it sees to a pattern it learned very early in life. That pattern is what tells the body what belongs and what doesn't. And blood type is one of the most important parts of that pattern. From the moment a person is born, the immune system begins to recognize the markers on its own red blood cells. These markers become part of the body's identity, almost like a biological signature. Once the immune system learns that signature, it remembers it. Anything that doesn't match can trigger a reaction, even if the difference is extremely small. This is why transfusions have to be matched carefully. If someone with type A blood receives type B, the immune system may see the B markers as foreign and attack the cells. The reaction can happen quickly, sometimes within minutes, because the body is trained to respond to unfamiliar signals without hesitation. It doesn't stop to wonder whether the blood is meant to help. It only knows that the pattern is wrong. That level of precision makes the immune system incredibly powerful, but it also raises an unsettling thought. Why would the body need to be so strict about blood in the first place? One explanation is that blood has always been one of the easiest ways for infections to spread. Long before modern medicine, injuries, bites, and wounds exposed people to bacteria and parasites from other humans and animals. If the immune system couldn't tell the difference between its own cells and someone else's, it might allow dangerous organisms to slip in unnoticed. In that sense, blood type could act like a security code. Only the right code gets through. Anything else is treated as a threat. Over thousands of years, this kind of protection may have helped humans survive in environments where infections were common and unpredictable. A strict immune response could stop some diseases before they spread too far. But the same system that protects us can also create problems, especially when modern medicine tries to do things the body was never designed for. Transfusions, organ transplants, and even some vaccines all depend on working around the immune system's rules. Doctors have learned how to match blood types, how to suppress immune reactions, and how to make the body accept things it would normally reject. But the fact that those rules exist at all suggests that the body evolved under conditions where recognizing self and not self was extremely important. And blood type became one of the ways the body kept track of that difference. What makes this even more interesting is that blood type markers aren't only found in blood. Similar markers appear in other tissues, including the lining of the digestive system, the respiratory tract, and even in certain fluids in the body. That means blood type might influence more than just transfusions. It could affect how the body interacts with the outside world in ways we don't always notice. Some researchers believe this is why certain blood types seem to react differently to infections. If the markers on cells change the way bacteria attach, or the way viruses enter the body, then blood type could quietly shape how diseases spread through a population. There have been studies suggesting that people with different blood types may have different risks for certain illnesses. The differences are usually small, and they don't determine what will happen to any one person. But across large groups, the patterns show up often enough to make scientists pay attention. Type O has been linked in some cases to lower risk of severe malaria, but higher risk of certain ulcers. Type A has been connected in some studies to different responses to viral infections. Type B appears to have its own patterns, sometimes stronger in certain regions than others. None of these findings are simple, and many are still debated, but they all point to the same idea. Blood type might influence the body in ways that go far beyond what we learned in school. And once you accept that, it becomes easier to understand why blood types have been surrounded by so many unusual theories over the years. Some of those theories come from science, others come from speculation, and a few come from places that feel more like conspiracy than research. One of the most famous examples is the idea that blood type might be connected to personality or behavior. This idea became especially popular in parts of Asia, where some people believe that a person's blood type can influence their temperament, their habits, even their compatibility with others. It's not considered proven science, but the belief has been around for decades, and it never completely disappeared. The reason the idea caught on is simple. Blood type already affects the body in ways we don't fully understand, so it doesn't seem impossible that it could affect other things too. Scientists are usually careful about claims like that because personality is influenced by many factors, not just biology. But even researchers admit that the immune system, hormones, and brain chemistry are connected in complicated ways. If blood type changes how the immune system reacts, it might indirectly affect other systems in the body as well. That doesn't mean blood type controls personality, but it means the door isn't completely closed on the idea that it could have subtle effects we haven't measured yet. And once people start thinking about hidden effects, the theories can become much stranger. Some writers have suggested that certain blood types might come from different ancient populations that mixed together long ago. Others have gone further, proposing that rare blood types could be evidence of unknown genetic influences, or even contact with groups that didn't leave clear records in history. Most scientists don't accept those ideas, but the fact that blood types vary so much between populations keeps the questions alive. When you see a trait that appears in one part of the world and not another, it's natural to wonder why. Did it happen by chance? Did it come from adaptation? Or did something in the past create differences we still don't fully understand? Even within mainstream science, there are mysteries that don't have clear answers. One of them is why the Rh factor exists at all. The Rh system is the second most important blood group after ABO, and it's the reason people are called Rh positive or Rh negative. For medical purposes, it's essential to know, especially during pregnancy, because an Rh mismatch between mother and baby can cause serious complications. But from an evolutionary point of view, the Rh factor is harder to explain. Why would some people have it and others not? Why is it more common in certain populations than others? And why does the immune system react so strongly to it? Some researchers believe the Rh system may be connected to ancient mutations that spread through certain groups and not others. Others think it might have been linked to resistance against diseases that no longer exist, leaving behind differences that don't seem to have a purpose today. And then there are the more unusual theories, the ones that sit on the edge between science and speculation, suggesting that the Rh negative type in particular may have a history that isn't fully understood. These ideas are controversial, and many scientists reject them, but they keep coming back, partly because the patterns are real, even if the explanations aren't clear. Rh negative blood is less common than Rh positive, but it appears in certain regions more often than others, especially in parts of Europe. That uneven distribution has led to all kinds of guesses about where it came from, how it spread, and why it stayed. Most of the time, the simplest explanation is the correct one. But sometimes, the simplest explanation still leaves questions behind. And blood types are full of those questions. Questions about evolution, about disease, about history, and about the strange fact that something as basic as blood can be so different from one person to another. As we keep going, we're going to look closer at some of the rarest blood types ever discovered, the ones that made doctors stop and wonder how they could even exist. Because once you see how unusual some of these cases are, it starts to feel like the story of human blood is still being written, and we may only understand a small part of it. When doctors talk about blood types in everyday situations, the conversation usually stays within the familiar groups. A, B, O, positive, negative. These are the ones hospitals check first, the ones written on medical charts, the ones most people remember from school. But behind those common labels is a much larger system, one that most people never see unless something unusual happens. And sometimes, something very unusual does happen. Every once in a while, doctors encounter a patient whose blood doesn't fit the normal patterns. At first, it might look like a testing error. The results don't match what the lab expects, so the samples are checked again, then again. And sometimes, after every possible mistake has been ruled out, the conclusion becomes clear. The blood is different. Not just slightly different, but different enough that it doesn't belong to any of the common categories. Cases like this are rare, but they've been documented many times, and each one reminds scientists that the human body still has variations we don't fully understand. These rare blood types often come from tiny genetic changes, mutations that alter the structure of the markers on red blood cells. Most mutations disappear over time, but occasionally one stays, passed down through generations until it becomes part of a small group of people. In some cases, the group is so small that only a handful of individuals on Earth share the same blood type. One of the most famous examples is the Rh null blood type, sometimes called the rarest blood in the world. Unlike the usual Rh positive or Rh negative categories, Rh null blood has none of the usual Rh markers at all. It's as if the system that normally places those markers simply didn't activate. From a medical point of view, this makes Rh null blood extremely valuable because it can be compatible with many other types. But it also makes life more complicated for the people who have it, because finding a safe transfusion for them can be very difficult. There are so few donors that hospitals sometimes have to search across countries to find a match. The rarity alone would be enough to make Rh null interesting. But what makes it more mysterious is that scientists still don't fully know why it exists. The mutation that creates it is understood at a basic level, but the reason it appeared in the first place and why it survived instead of disappearing is harder to explain. In evolution, traits that don't help survival usually fade over time. But Rh null didn't vanish. It stayed. And that suggests that even rare variations can find a way to remain part of the human story. There are other rare blood types as well, each with its own history. Some are connected to specific families, passed down through generations like a hidden signature. Others appear in certain regions more often than anywhere else, hinting at events in the past that shaped the genetics of those populations. Sometimes the explanation is simple. A small community, isolated for a long time, may develop unusual traits because the same genes are shared again and again. Over many generations, rare variations can become more common inside that group, even if they are almost unknown elsewhere. But not every case fits that pattern perfectly. There are blood types that appear in places where scientists wouldn't expect them, showing up in individuals whose family history doesn't seem to explain the difference. When that happens, researchers start looking for other possibilities, including mutations that happened recently or combinations of genes that produce something new. The fact that blood types can change at all is one of the reasons the subject feels so strange. We tend to think of the human body as stable, as if the basic structure has already been decided. But genetics doesn't work that way. Small changes are happening all the time, usually without any noticeable effect, but occasionally creating something completely different. Most of the time, those changes don't matter. Sometimes they matter a lot. And sometimes they raise questions that don't have clear answers. One of those questions is why the blood group systems are so complicated in the first place. Scientists have identified more than 30 different blood group systems, each based on different molecules, different genes, and different rules for compatibility. Some of them are so subtle that they only matter in very specific situations, like certain transfusions or rare medical conditions. If the body only needed one way to recognize its own blood, why are there so many? One theory is that the immune system evolved in a world filled with threats we don't see anymore. Ancient humans lived surrounded by parasites, bacteria, and viruses that constantly changed. The more ways the body had to recognize foreign cells, the better its chances of stopping an infection before it spread. In that kind of environment, complexity could be an advantage. Instead of one simple marker, the body developed many. Instead of one rule, it created dozens. Each new variation made it harder for a disease to affect everyone the same way. And over thousands of years, those variations became part of what makes humans different from one another. This idea fits with what scientists see in other parts of the immune system. The genes that control immune responses are some of the most diverse in the human body. Two people can have very different versions, even if they look similar on the outside. That diversity helps protect the population as a whole, because a virus that harms one person may not harm another. Blood types may be part of that same strategy, not a mistake, not a flaw, but a way to make sure humanity doesn't all react the same way to the same danger. Still, even with that explanation, there are details that feel almost too precise to ignore. For example, some blood types seem to appear at higher rates in regions that experience certain historical diseases. In areas where malaria was common, certain blood traits became more frequent. In places where different infections spread, different patterns appeared. It's as if the body adapted again and again, adjusting slowly to whatever threat was most common at the time. The strange part is that these changes happened long before anyone understood what was happening. No one knew about blood types thousands of years ago. No one knew about immune markers. Yet the patterns formed anyway, shaped by survival, by chance, and by time. When you look at it that way, blood becomes something more than biology. It becomes a record of everything the human species has lived through. Every epidemic, every migration, every environment that forced the body to change. And that idea has led some people to wonder whether blood types might hold information we haven't learned to read yet. Not secret codes in a mystical sense, but clues about the past that science hasn't fully decoded. If blood can show where populations lived, what diseases they faced, and how they adapted, then studying those patterns might reveal parts of history that were never written down. Researchers already use genetics to trace human migration, following changes in DNA to see how people moved across continents. Blood types are part of that story too, because they travel with the genes that create them. When scientists map the distribution of blood types around the world, they see lines that match ancient movements of people, patterns that suggest where groups separated, where they mixed, and where they stayed isolated for long periods of time. It's like looking at a map drawn inside the body, a map that doesn't show borders or cities, but survival. And once you start thinking about blood that way, it becomes easier to understand why the subject has inspired so many strange theories over the years. Because when something carries history inside it, people naturally wonder how much history is really there. Some theories stay close to science, asking whether blood type might influence health, disease, or adaptation in ways we don't fully understand yet. Others go further, suggesting connections to ancient populations, lost migrations, or genetic changes that don't fit the usual timeline. Most of those ideas remain unproven, but they continue to appear, partly because blood is one of the few things every human shares, and at the same time, one of the few things that can be so different from one person to another. And that difference makes people curious. As we move deeper into the story, we're going to look more closely at one of the blood systems that has caused more speculation than almost any other, the Rh factor, and the strange patterns that made some researchers wonder whether its history might be more complicated than it first appears. Because once the Rh system was discovered, it didn't just change medicine. It opened the door to questions that still don't have simple answers. When the Rh factor was first discovered, it didn't seem mysterious at all. It was simply another marker on the surface of red blood cells, one more detail that doctors needed to check before giving a transfusion. If the marker was present, the blood was called Rh positive. If it was missing, the blood was called Rh negative. the system worked. It explained medical reactions that had confused doctors for years, and for a while, that seemed like the end of the story. But the more scientists studied the Rh factor, the more unusual it started to look. Unlike the ABO blood groups, which are spread fairly widely across the world, the Rh negative type has a very uneven distribution. In some populations, it is rare, almost non-existent. In others, it appears much more often than expected. Certain parts of Europe, especially in the West, have a noticeably higher percentage of Rh negative individuals compared to most of the rest of the world. At first, researchers assumed this was just another example of genetic variation. Human populations have always been different from one another in small ways, and blood types are part of that pattern. But the Rh system created complications that didn't fit as neatly as the ABO groups did, especially when scientists began to study pregnancy. Doctors noticed that when an Rh negative mother carried an Rh positive baby, problems could occur. The mother's immune system might recognize the baby's blood as foreign and produce antibodies against it. In later pregnancies, those antibodies could cross the placenta and attack the baby's red blood cells, causing a dangerous condition known as hemolytic disease of the newborn. This reaction can be serious, but today it can be treated and doctors know how to prevent it. What puzzled researchers was not the medical part, but the evolutionary question behind it. Why would a trait exist that can create problems during reproduction? In nature, traits that make survival harder usually fade over time. If something makes it less likely for children to survive, you would expect it to become rare or disappear completely. But Rh negative blood did not disappear. In some populations, it remained common enough to be noticed again and again. That raised a question that scientists still discuss today. Was the Rh negative type simply a mutation that survived by chance, or did it once have an advantage that we no longer understand? One idea is that the Rh system may have been connected to diseases that existed in the past, but are no longer common today. If Rh negative blood provided protection against a particular infection thousands of years ago, that advantage might have been strong enough to keep the trait in the population, even if it later became less useful. Another possibility is that the difference appeared in a small group that remained isolated for a long time. In isolated populations, unusual traits can become more common simply because there are fewer people, and the same genes are passed around repeatedly. Over generations, something rare can become normal within that group, even if it stays rare everywhere else. Both of these explanations make sense from a scientific point of view. But the Rh factor has always attracted more speculation than most blood traits, partly because the patterns don't always look simple, and partly because people are naturally drawn to anything that seems unusual inside the human body. Over time, theories began to appear that went far beyond normal biology. Some writers suggested that Rh negative blood might come from a different ancient population that mixed with early humans long ago. Others proposed that it could be connected to unknown genetic changes that happened at some point in history and spread through certain regions. A few even claimed that the difference might be evidence of something outside the usual story of human evolution. Most scientists reject those ideas, and there is no reliable evidence that anything like that happened. But the fact that the Rh system behaves differently from the ABO system keeps the discussion alive. When a trait is unevenly distributed, when it causes unusual reactions, and when its origin isn't completely clear, people start looking for explanations that go beyond the obvious. Even within mainstream research, the Rh factor is more complicated than it first appears. It isn't controlled by a single simple gene, but by a group of related genes that work together to produce the markers on red blood cells. Small changes in those genes can create different variations, some common, some extremely rare. Scientists have found dozens of Rh-related variants, most of which never become widespread. Some exist only in a few families, passed down quietly without anyone noticing until a medical test reveals them. Others appear in certain regions more often, suggesting that they developed under specific conditions in the past. All of this points to the same idea. The human blood system is not fixed. It's still changing, still evolving, still producing new variations, even now. That might sound strange, because we usually think of evolution as something that happened long ago, not something that continues today. But the truth is that small genetic changes never stop. Every generation carries tiny differences from the one before it. Most of those differences don't matter, but sometimes one of them creates a new trait that survives. Blood types are one of the places where those changes are easiest to see, because even a small difference can have a noticeable effect. And when you look at the full list of blood groups that scientists have identified, it becomes clear just how many variations the human body can produce. Some people have markers that make transfusions difficult. Some have markers that protect them from certain infections. Some have combinations so rare that doctors have to search across continents to find compatible blood. Each case adds another piece to the puzzle. Why so many? Why so much diversity in something as basic as blood? One answer is that the immune system benefits from variety. If every person had identical blood, a disease that learned how to attack one person could attack everyone the same way. With different blood types, the situation becomes more complicated. A virus that spreads easily in one group might struggle in another. A parasite that attaches to one type of cell might not recognize a different one. Over time, that variety can help the species survive. It's not about protecting individuals. It's about protecting the population as a whole. This idea makes blood types feel less like random differences and more like part of a long strategy, shaped by millions of years of survival. Every epidemic, every environmental change, every migration could have nudged the balance a little, making one blood type more common in one place and another more common somewhere else. But even if that explains most of the patterns, there are still details that feel unfinished, as if the story isn't complete yet. For example, scientists still don't fully understand why certain blood types seem to influence the risk of specific diseases, or why some rare types appear without a clear reason. They don't know exactly how many variations exist, because new ones are still being discovered, and they don't know whether the system will keep changing in the future, or whether it will eventually settle into a stable form. The more we learn, the more it feels like blood is not just a part of the body. It's a living record. A record of survival, adaptation, and chance, written in a language we're still learning to read. And the deeper we go into that language, the more it begins to connect with other mysteries of the human body, especially the immune system itself, which may be the most complex and least understood system we have. Because once you start looking closely at how the immune system recognizes the body, how it remembers, and how it reacts, you realize that blood types are only one piece of a much larger puzzle, one that scientists are still trying to put together. To really understand why blood types exist at all, you have to look at the immune system in a different way than most people do. We usually think of it as something that turns on only when we get sick, something that fights infections when they appear and then goes quiet again. But the immune system is never truly off. Every second, it's watching, checking, comparing, deciding what belongs inside the body and what doesn't. It does this by recognizing patterns. Every cell in your body carries tiny molecules on its surface, like identification tags. These tags tell the immune system, this is part of you, this is safe. The moment something appears with the wrong pattern, the system becomes alert. It doesn't know whether the difference comes from bacteria, a virus, another person's blood, or something else entirely. All it knows is that the signal doesn't match. And when the signal doesn't match, the reaction can be immediate. Blood types are part of that pattern system. The markers that define A, B, O, and the Rh factor are not just labels for doctors. They are signals the immune system uses to recognize what is normal for that body. Once the immune system learns those signals early in life, it remembers them with incredible accuracy. This memory is one of the reasons transfusions can be dangerous without matching blood types. The immune system doesn't see donated blood as help. It sees it as something unfamiliar entering the bloodstream, and its first instinct is to destroy it. From an evolutionary point of view, that reaction makes sense. For most of human history, blood from another person usually meant injury, violence, or infection. There was no reason for the body to assume that foreign blood was safe. A strong reaction could prevent parasites, bacteria, or toxins from spreading through the bloodstream. In a world without medicine, that kind of protection could make the difference between life and death. So the immune system became strict. Very strict. And that strictness helped shape the variety of blood types we see today. But the immune system doesn't only react to blood. It reacts to almost everything that enters the body, from the air we breathe to the food we eat. The cells lining the mouth, the lungs, and the digestive tract are constantly interacting with the outside world, and many of them carry the same kinds of markers that define blood types. That means blood type isn't only about transfusions. It may also influence how the body deals with bacteria, viruses, and even certain foods. Scientists have found that the molecules related to the ABO blood group appear in the lining of the stomach and intestines, where they can affect how microbes attach to cells. Some bacteria seem to prefer certain markers, while others attach more easily to different ones. This doesn't mean that blood type determines whether someone will get sick, but it may change the odds slightly, especially across large populations. Over thousands of years, those small differences could add up. If one blood type made people a little more resistant to a common disease, the people who had it might survive more often. If another type made infection more likely, it might become less common in that region. Slowly, generation after generation, the balance would shift. This is one of the reasons scientists believe blood types may have been shaped by epidemics in the past. Long before modern records, diseases moved through human populations again and again. Some outbreaks disappeared without leaving much trace. Others changed the course of history. When a disease spreads through a community, it doesn't affect everyone the same way. Some people get very sick, some get only mild symptoms, and some seem almost untouched. Part of that difference may come from the immune system, and part of it may come from blood type. There have been studies suggesting that certain blood groups respond differently to particular infections. The differences are not absolute, but they appear often enough that researchers keep finding them. In some cases, type O seems to offer protection against severe forms of malaria. In other cases, type A has been linked to different responses to viruses. Type B shows its own patterns, sometimes appearing more often in regions where certain diseases were once common. None of this means blood type controls health, but it suggests that it can influence how the body reacts under certain conditions. And when those conditions last for thousands of years, the influence can shape entire populations. This idea also explains why the world doesn't have one single blood type. If everyone had the same markers, a disease that learned how to attack those markers could spread through the entire species. With different blood types, the situation becomes more complicated. A pathogen that works well against one type might not work as well against another. Diversity becomes protection, not for the individual, but for humanity as a whole. This is a pattern scientists see again and again in the immune system. The genes involved in immune responses are some of the most varied in the human body. Two people can have very different versions, even if they look similar on the outside. That variety makes it harder for a single disease to affect everyone in the same way. Blood types may be part of that same strategy. one piece of a much larger system designed by evolution to keep the species alive even when individuals don't survive. But the immune system has another feature that makes the story even more interesting. It remembers. Once the immune system encounters something unfamiliar, it keeps a record of that encounter. The next time the same pattern appears, the reaction can be faster and stronger. This is why vaccines work, and it's also why the body reacts so strongly to the wrong blood type. The system isn't just reacting in the moment, it's reacting based on what it learned before. That ability to remember raises a strange question when you think about blood types. If the immune system learns to recognize its own blood from the very beginning, how did the first differences appear without causing constant reactions? At some point in the past, mutations must have created new blood markers that didn't exist before. The people who carried those markers would have been slightly different from everyone around them. Yet those differences survived. They didn't disappear. That means the changes must have happened slowly enough, or in small enough groups, that the immune system adapted along with them. Over time, what was once unusual became normal for that population. It's a reminder that evolution doesn't happen in big dramatic steps. It happens quietly, one generation at a time. A small change appears. It spreads a little, then a little more, until one day it feels like it was always there. Blood types may be one of the clearest examples of that slow process still visible in modern humans. They show how the body can change without changing the way we look. They show how history can be written in chemistry instead of words. And they show how something as ordinary as blood can carry traces of events that happened long before anyone was there to record them. The more scientists study the immune system, the more they realize how much is still unknown. New markers are discovered, new interactions are found, and new patterns appear in places no one expected to look. Every discovery makes the system feel less like a simple defense and more like a complex language, one the body uses to describe itself. Blood types are part of that language. And like any language, they tell stories. Stories about survival, about disease, about movement across the planet, and about the strange ways the human body adapts without anyone noticing. As we keep going, we're going to look at some of the more unusual ideas that people have connected to blood types over the years. Not all of them are accepted by science, but they exist because the patterns in blood are real, and whenever something real is hard to explain, theories start to appear around it. Some of those theories stay close to biology, others go much further. And once you hear them, it becomes easy to understand why blood has always felt like more than just a part of the body, and why the secrets inside it still make people wonder what we might not know yet. When a subject sits right on the edge between science and mystery, it tends to attract more theories than almost anything else. Blood types are exactly that kind of subject. They are real, measurable, and studied in laboratories every day, yet at the same time, they carry patterns that aren't always easy to explain. Whenever something in biology shows differences between groups of people, especially differences that seem ancient or unevenly spread across the world, curiosity naturally grows. And curiosity often turns into speculation. Some of these ideas stay close to real science, asking whether blood type might influence health, behavior, or survival in ways we haven't fully measured yet. Others go further, suggesting connections to lost populations, forgotten migrations, or genetic changes that happened long before written history. A few theories even step outside conventional biology completely, proposing explanations that most researchers don't accept, but that continue to appear again and again, because the patterns themselves feel unusual enough to invite questions. One of the reasons blood types inspire so many theories is that they don't follow simple borders. If blood types were evenly distributed across the world, nobody would think much about them. But they aren't. Some regions have much higher percentages of certain types, and those patterns sometimes line up with ancient migration routes, old civilizations, or isolated populations that lived apart for long periods of time. When scientists map blood types around the world, the results look less like random dots and more like faint outlines of human history. Type O appears very frequently in parts of the Americas, especially in indigenous populations. Type B appears more often in Central Asia than in most other places. Type A has high percentages in parts of Europe and Australia. Rh negative blood shows its own pattern, with higher numbers in certain European regions and much lower numbers in many other parts of the world. These distributions don't prove anything mysterious by themselves. They can usually be explained by evolution, migration, and chance. But when people see patterns connected to ancient populations, it's easy to start wondering whether there might be more to the story than we currently understand. One of the most common ideas is that different blood types may have developed in different groups of early humans as they spread across the planet. Thousands of years ago, human populations were smaller and more isolated than they are today. Groups could live for long periods with little contact with others, adapting to their own environments, their own diets, and their own diseases. In that kind of situation, small genetic differences could become permanent. If one group developed a mutation that changed their blood markers, that mutation might stay within that group for generations. Later, when populations met and mixed, the different blood types would spread, creating the variety we see today. This explanation fits what we know about human history, and most scientists believe something like this happened many times. But there are details that still feel unfinished, especially when certain traits appear more often in places where we don't fully understand the genetic history. That's where the more unusual theories begin. One idea that has been repeated for decades is that the Rh negative blood type might have a different origin from the other types. This theory isn't accepted by mainstream science, but it continues to appear because the Rh system behaves differently from the ABO system in several ways. The uneven distribution, the complications during pregnancy, and the fact that Rh negative blood is less common worldwide all make people wonder why it exists at all. Some writers have suggested that Rh negative blood could come from a population that was separate from the main line of human evolution for a long time. Others have connected it to ancient migrations that left little archaeological evidence. A few theories go even further, proposing that rare blood types might be the result of genetic changes that happened under unusual conditions, or that came from sources we don't fully understand yet. There is no solid proof for these ideas, and most scientists consider them speculation. But the fact that they keep appearing shows how strange blood type patterns can seem when you look at them without simple answers. Even within normal biology, there are still questions about how some variations survive. In evolution, traits usually spread because they help survival, or disappear because they don't. But not every blood type seems to have a clear advantage today. Some appear neutral, neither helping nor hurting in obvious ways, yet they remain part of the population. That suggests that the conditions that shaped them may belong to the past, diseases that no longer exist, environments that changed, pressures that disappeared thousands of years ago. The human body still carries the results, even if the reason for them is gone. Another reason blood types attract so much attention is that they are one of the few genetic traits people can easily identify. Most of our DNA is invisible to us, but blood type is something you can test, something you can write down, something that feels personal. Once people know their type, it's natural to wonder what it means. Does it say anything about health? About ancestry? About personality? Science only supports some of those questions, but curiosity goes further than science sometimes does. In certain cultures, blood type has even been linked to personality traits, in a way similar to how some cultures use astrology. The idea isn't proven, but it became popular because people notice patterns that seem to repeat often enough to feel meaningful. Type A described as careful or organized. Type B described as creative or independent. Type O described as confident or strong. Type AB described as balanced or unusual. There's no clear scientific evidence that blood type controls personality, but the belief itself shows how strongly people feel that blood must mean something more than just chemistry. When something is inside every person and different in every person, it feels like it should have a deeper meaning. Scientists tend to stay cautious about those ideas because biology is complicated and most traits come from many genes working together, not just one. But even researchers admit that the immune system, hormones, and brain chemistry all interact in ways we don't completely understand yet. If blood type affects the immune system, and the immune system affects the body in many ways, it isn't impossible that subtle connections could exist that we haven't measured yet. Not magic, not destiny, just small influences we haven't fully mapped. And that's often how science works. The first discovery answers one question, but it opens 10 more. Blood types started as a way to make transfusions safer. Then they became clues about disease, then clues about evolution, then clues about human migration. And the deeper scientists look, the more the subject feels like a thread that connects many different parts of biology together. It connects the immune system, genetics, history, and survival in ways that aren't obvious at first, but start to make sense once you see the patterns. And those patterns become even more interesting when researchers look at how blood types may have changed over time, not just thousands of years ago, but in more recent history, as humans moved faster, mixed more, and faced new kinds of diseases that our ancestors never encountered. Because the story of blood types didn't end in the ancient world. It kept going, and it may still be changing now. When people think about evolution, they usually imagine something slow and distant, something that happened long ago when humans were still learning how to survive in a world full of dangers we don't face anymore. It's easy to picture evolution as a finished process, as if the human body reached its final form thousands of years ago and has stayed the same ever since. But biology doesn't really work that way. Change never completely stops. It just becomes harder to notice. Blood types are one of the clearest reminders that the human body is still part of that long, quiet process. Even today, small genetic variations continue to appear in populations around the world. Most of them don't affect daily life, so nobody pays attention. But sometimes those changes show up in places where scientists are already looking closely, like in blood tests. And when they do, they reveal that the system is not frozen in time. It's still adjusting, still shifting, still carrying the effects of everything humans have lived through. One reason blood types may still be changing is that the world itself has changed faster in the last few thousand years than at almost any other time in human history. For most of our past, people lived in small groups, moving across land slowly, rarely traveling far from where they were born. Diseases spread slowly, populations stayed separate, and genetic differences could remain isolated for generations. But once humans began building cities, trading across continents, and traveling long distances, those boundaries started to disappear. Populations that had been separate for thousands of years began to mix. Genes that once stayed in one region spread to others. Blood types that were common in one place became less concentrated as people moved and intermarried. This mixing didn't erase blood types, but it changed how often each one appeared. Scientists can see this in modern data. In large cities, the distribution of blood types is often more balanced than in isolated regions. Places with a long history of migration tend to show more variety, while remote communities sometimes still have patterns that look closer to the past. It's like looking at layers of history, all still present at the same time. Some patterns come from ancient migrations, some from medieval trade routes, some from modern travel, and all of them are written quietly in the chemistry of the blood. Another reason blood types may still be evolving is that the environment keeps changing. New diseases appear, old ones disappear, and medical technology alters the conditions people live under. In the past, survival often depended on whether the body could fight off infections naturally. Today, medicine can save lives that would have been lost centuries ago. That changes the rules. Traits that once gave a strong advantage may matter less now, while traits that once caused problems may no longer be as dangerous. For example, a blood type that made someone more vulnerable to a disease in the past might not affect survival today if that disease can be treated. Over time, the balance of blood types could shift simply because the pressures that shape them are different now. This doesn't mean the changes happen quickly. Evolution still moves slowly, even in the modern world. But the process never really stops. Every generation carries small differences, and those differences can become more noticeable over long periods. Some scientists believe that blood types may also be influenced by factors we don't fully understand yet, including interactions between genes that don't seem connected at first. The human genome is incredibly complex, and traits that look simple on the surface often involve many different pieces working together. A change in one gene can affect another, sometimes in ways that aren't obvious until researchers study thousands of people. Because of that, blood type patterns may reflect more than just survival against disease. They may also show how different genes balance each other, how the body maintains stability while still allowing variation. This idea makes blood types feel less like isolated traits and more like part of a larger system, one where every change has to fit with everything else. The body can't change too fast. It can't change too much at once. But it can change a little, again and again, over generations. That slow adjustment is what makes the story of blood types feel almost endless. Just when scientists think they understand the system, a new variation appears, or a new pattern shows up in data from a different population. Sometimes the discovery is small, something only specialists notice. Other times it changes the way researchers think about the whole subject. For example, there are cases where people have blood types that don't match what their family history would suggest. At first, this seems impossible because blood type is inherited from parents. But genetics can be complicated, and sometimes rare combinations of genes produce results that look unusual until they're studied more closely. There are also situations where people have markers that don't fit perfectly into any known group. When that happens, scientists have to look deeper, studying the genes themselves instead of just the blood cells. In some cases, they discover new variants that had never been recorded before. Each discovery adds another branch to the tree, and the tree keeps growing. This is one reason researchers believe there may be many blood variations that we haven't found yet. Most people never need such detailed testing, so rare types can exist without anyone noticing. Only when a transfusion fails to match, or when a patient has an unusual reaction, do doctors begin to look more closely. And when they do, they sometimes find something new. Not a new species, not a dramatic mutation, but a small change that reminds us the system isn't finished. It's still moving, still adjusting, still carrying the story of human survival forward, one generation at a time. The idea that blood types are still evolving also explains why they don't fit perfectly into simple categories. The four main groups are only the most visible part of a much larger network of differences. Behind them are dozens of smaller systems, each with its own variations, each shaped by the same long history of adaptation and chance. When you put all of those systems together, the number of possible combinations becomes enormous. Every person carries a slightly different set of markers, even if their main blood type is the same as someone else's. In that sense, no two people have exactly the same blood, even though we use the same labels to describe it. That individuality is part of what makes transfusion medicine so precise, and also part of what makes the science so fascinating. The more closely we look, the more differences we find, and the more those differences tell us about where we came from. Because blood doesn't just carry oxygen, it carries history. It carries the record of ancient epidemics, migrations, and environments that shaped the human body long before anyone knew what genes were. And sometimes, when scientists follow those records far enough back, they reach questions that don't only belong to biology, but to the story of humanity itself. Questions about where different populations began, questions about how they separated and came back together, questions about why certain traits survived when others disappeared. Those questions don't always have clear answers, but they make the study of blood types feel less like a medical topic and more like a quiet investigation into the past. And the deeper that investigation goes, the more it touches on the idea that the human body may remember things that history forgot. Because even when written records are lost, even when languages disappear, the patterns inside the body remain. And blood is one of the places where those patterns are easiest to see, if you know how to look. When scientists began comparing blood type patterns with human migration, they discovered something that made the subject even more fascinating. The distribution of blood groups around the world often follows the same paths that archaeologists and geneticists believe early humans traveled thousands of years ago. It's not a perfect map, but the similarities appear often enough to make researchers pay close attention. Long before written history, small groups of humans moved across continents, sometimes slowly over generations, sometimes in waves caused by climate changes, food shortages, or natural disasters. As these groups separated, their genes changed slightly over time. Some variations became common in one region, while others stayed rare or disappeared completely. Blood types traveled with those people. Every migration carried them forward. Every isolation shaped them a little more. When scientists study modern populations, they can sometimes see traces of those ancient movements hidden in the percentages of blood types. For example, the high frequency of type O in many indigenous American populations fits with the idea that the first people who crossed into the Americas came from a relatively small group. When a small group becomes the ancestors of a much larger population, certain traits can become very common simply because they were present in the original travelers. This effect is called the founder effect, and it can leave strong genetic patterns that last for thousands of years. Something similar can happen when populations stay isolated for long periods. In remote regions, islands, or mountain valleys, people may have fewer chances to mix with outsiders. Over time, certain blood types can become more common there than anywhere else, not because they are better, but because the same genes keep being passed down within the same group. When researchers map these patterns, the results sometimes look almost like faded lines across the world, showing where people once traveled, where they stayed, and where they mixed with others later. It's a quiet kind of history. No written records, no monuments, just chemistry. Blood types have even been used in the past to help study the origins of different populations, long before modern DNA sequencing became common. By comparing the frequency of certain blood groups, scientists tried to understand how groups of people were related and how they might have moved over time. Today, genetics gives much more detailed answers, but blood type studies were one of the first tools researchers had for looking into human history at a biological level. What made the results so interesting was that they didn't always match what people expected. Some populations that looked similar on the surface had very different blood type distributions. Others that lived far apart showed unexpected similarities. Each time that happened, it suggested that human history was more complicated than simple stories about where people came from. There were migrations no one had recorded, contacts between groups that left no written trace, periods of isolation followed by sudden mixing, all of it still visible if you looked in the right place. And blood was one of those places. Because blood types change slowly, they act almost like fossils, preserving information from the past even when everything else has changed. Languages can disappear, cultures can shift, borders can move, but the patterns in the body tend to stay much longer, especially when they don't affect daily life in obvious ways. This is one of the reasons blood types sometimes appear in discussions about ancient mysteries, even when the connection isn't always clear. When people see a pattern that seems older than history, it's natural to wonder whether it might be linked to events we don't fully understand yet. Most of the time, the explanation turns out to be ordinary evolution, migration, and chance. But the feeling of mystery remains, because the body keeps records in ways that are harder to read than books. Another thing that makes blood types interesting is that they don't only show where people went, they also show what people survived. Throughout history, diseases have been one of the strongest forces shaping human populations. Long before modern medicine, epidemics could spread through entire regions, killing large numbers of people in a short time. Those who survived passed their genes to the next generation, and over time the population changed. If a certain blood type gave even a small advantage against a disease, that advantage could become visible after many generations. Scientists believe this may explain why certain blood types are more common in areas where particular infections were once widespread. In regions where malaria was common, certain blood traits appear more often. In areas where different diseases spread, different patterns show up. The changes are not dramatic enough to notice in one lifetime, but over centuries they can reshape the genetic makeup of entire populations. It's a slow kind of selection, happening quietly, without anyone realizing it. People don't see evolution happening. They only see the result. Blood types are one of those results. They show that the human body has been adjusting to its environment for as long as humans have existed. Every generation carries the marks of what came before, even if no one remembers the events that caused those changes. This idea also explains why blood types don't follow modern borders. Countries are recent compared to human history. The patterns in blood go back much further, to times when people moved according to climate, food, and survival, not according to lines on a map. That's why you can find similar blood type distributions in regions that are far apart today, and very different patterns in places that are close together. The differences come from history, not geography alone. And history, especially ancient history, is rarely simple. The more scientists learn about human genetics, the more they realize that populations have mixed and separated many times. There were migrations we only recently discovered, groups that disappeared without leaving written records, and contacts between cultures that were forgotten until genetic evidence revealed them. Blood types are part of that story. Not the whole story, but one piece of it. A piece that shows how the body carries information long after the people who lived that history are gone. And that idea leads to one of the most interesting questions about blood types. If they can tell us where humans have been and what humans have survived, what else might they tell us that we haven't figured out yet? Scientists continue to study blood groups not only for medicine, but for clues about how the immune system works, how genes interact, and how the body adapts to new conditions. Every time a rare type is discovered, or a new pattern appears, it adds another detail to the picture. Sometimes the detail is small. Sometimes it changes what researchers thought they understood. But each one reminds us that something as ordinary as blood can hold a surprisingly long memory. A memory of migration, a memory of disease, a memory of survival stretching back further than any written history. And as we keep going, the story becomes even more interesting when we look at the rarest blood types ever found, the ones so uncommon that they force scientists to rethink how much variation the human body can really produce. Because once you see how unusual some of those cases are, it becomes clear that the system of human blood is far more complex than most people ever imagine. The deeper scientists look into blood types, the more they realize that the familiar groups most people know are only a small part of a much larger system. Behind the common labels are dozens of lesser-known blood group systems, each with its own variations, each with its own history, and some so rare that they only appear a few times in the entire world. These rare cases don't just make medicine more complicated, They also show how flexible the human body really is, and how much diversity can exist without anyone noticing. In hospitals, rare blood types are usually discovered by accident. A patient needs a transfusion, the lab runs the usual tests, and something doesn't match. At first, the result looks like a mistake. The sample is checked again, sometimes by a different lab, sometimes with more detailed methods. Most of the time, the second test confirms the first. The blood is different. Not wrong, not damaged, just different in a way that doesn't fit the standard categories. When this happens, doctors begin looking at the smaller blood group systems, the ones that most people never hear about. These include groups with names like Kell, Kidd, Duffy, Lutheran, Diego, and many others. Each system is based on tiny differences in proteins on the surface of red blood cells. Most of these differences don't matter in everyday life, but in transfusions they can become very important. If the immune system sees a marker it doesn't recognize, it can react. Sometimes the reaction is mild, sometimes it's serious, and sometimes it forces doctors to search for a donor whose blood matches in ways that go far beyond the usual tests. There are cases where hospitals have had to contact blood banks in other countries just to find one compatible donor. In a few situations, the only match was a relative, or even a single person known to have the same rare type. These moments remind doctors that human blood is not as uniform as it might seem. Underneath the surface, there are thousands of possible combinations, most of them invisible unless something goes wrong. One of the rarest conditions ever discovered is known as the Bombay blood type. It was first identified in India, and at first it looked like type O, because the usual A and B markers were missing. But when doctors tried to use normal type O blood for transfusion, the reaction showed that something else was different. People with the Bombay type lack a molecule that most other blood types depend on, a molecule that usually sits underneath the A and B markers. Without that base molecule, the usual classification doesn't work. The immune system treats normal blood as foreign, even if it would be safe for someone with type O. Because of that, people with this blood type can only receive blood from others with the same rare condition. And there are very few of them. Discoveries like this show that the blood system isn't just 4 types, or even a handful of types. It's more like a network with many layers, each one adding another level of difference between individuals. Most of the time, those differences don't matter. But when they do, they reveal how much variation the human body can hold without anyone realizing it. These rare blood types also tell scientists something important about evolution. They show that genetic changes don't always disappear, even when they are uncommon. Sometimes a mutation appears in one person, then passes to their children, then to their grandchildren, and slowly becomes part of a small population. If that population stays together long enough, the trait can survive for generations, even if it never spreads widely. In this way, rare blood types become like small branches on the tree of human genetics. Most people share the larger branches, a few carry the smaller ones, and all of them together form the full shape of the tree. Researchers believe that many rare blood types probably exist that we haven't discovered yet. Because most people never need detailed testing, unusual variations can remain hidden for a lifetime. Only when medicine needs to match blood very precisely do those differences come to light. This makes the study of blood types feel less like a finished subject and more like an ongoing search. Each new case adds another piece, another variation, another reminder that the system is more complex than anyone expected when blood groups were first discovered. The idea that human blood can vary so much also leads to another interesting thought. If so many differences exist at the level of molecules, how many other differences exist in the body that we don't notice at all? The immune system, the nervous system, the hormones that control mood and energy, all of them depend on proteins and signals that can change slightly from person to person. Most of those changes don't create obvious new traits, but they can still affect how the body works. This is one reason scientists are careful about saying that all humans are exactly the same biologically. We are the same in the ways that matter most, but underneath that similarity is a huge amount of variation, much more than we can see from the outside. Blood types are one of the few places where that variation becomes visible. And because they are visible, they have attracted more attention than most other genetic differences. Over the years, this attention has led to all kinds of ideas, some scientific, some speculative, and some that sit somewhere in between. People have tried to connect blood types to health, to personality, to ancestry, even to ancient history, in ways that go beyond what research can prove. Most of those ideas don't hold up under careful study, but they keep appearing for the same reason they always have. Because blood feels important. It feels like it should mean something more than just chemistry. Throughout history, blood has been connected to identity, to family, to survival, and to the idea that something inside us carries the story of who we are. Long before science understood genetics, people believed that blood held the essence of a person, the thing that tied generations together. Modern science doesn't use that language, but in a way, the idea isn't completely wrong. Blood really does carry information from the past. Not memories, not thoughts, but genetic patterns that come from ancestors who lived thousands of years ago. When scientists study those patterns, they see traces of migrations, of epidemics, of environments that force the human body to adapt again and again. Every rare blood type is part of that record. Every variation is a reminder that the human species didn't appear all at once, but changed slowly, shaped by survival and chance. And the more those variations are studied, the more it becomes clear that we still don't know the full story. There are still markers we haven't identified, still patterns we don't understand, still questions about why certain traits survived when others disappeared. As research continues, the picture becomes more detailed, but also more complicated. The simple idea of 4 blood types turns into dozens, then hundreds of possible combinations, each one connected to the same long history of evolution. And that history doesn't stop in the past. It keeps going. Even now, the human body is still part of that slow process, still changing in small ways, still producing differences that may not be noticed until years or generations later. As we move further into the story, the focus shifts from rare blood types themselves to the bigger question behind them. Why does the human body allow so much variation at all? Why not one perfect system, one universal blood type, one design that never changes? The answer may lie in the idea that diversity itself is what keeps a species alive. And once you start looking at blood types from that perspective, they stop feeling like random differences and start feeling like part of a strategy written into biology long before anyone understood what it meant. When scientists try to explain why humans have so many blood types instead of just one, the answer often comes back to the same idea that appears again and again in biology. Survival rarely depends on perfection. It depends on variation. A species that is too uniform can be strong under normal conditions, but dangerously vulnerable when something changes. A disease, a shift in climate, or a new environment can affect everyone the same way if everyone is built the same way. But when there is diversity, the outcome is different. Some individuals may be affected more, some less, and some may survive when others don't. Over time, that difference can keep the species going, even when individuals are lost. Blood types may be one example of this kind of protection. Instead of one universal pattern, humans develop several. Instead of one immune response, there are many slightly different versions. Each blood type reacts to the world in its own way, and that means no single threat can affect everyone equally. This idea helps explain why blood type diversity never disappeared, even though some differences can create complications, especially in modern medicine. In the past, the risks connected to blood types may have been smaller than the advantages they provided. A trait that helped survival during an epidemic could remain in the population, even if it caused problems in situations that didn't exist yet, like transfusions or certain medical treatments. Evolution doesn't plan ahead. It only responds to what is happening at the time. And for most of human history, the biggest dangers were not surgeries or transfusions, but infections, injuries, and harsh environments. In those conditions, a strong and varied immune system was more important than perfect compatibility between individuals. Blood types may be part of that balance, not designed for medicine, designed for survival. Another reason variation survives is that genes rarely work alone. A change that affects blood type might also affect something else, something less obvious but still important. Scientists call this genetic linkage, when one trait is connected to another because the same genes influence both. It's possible that some blood type differences stayed in the population, not because of the blood itself, but because of other effects connected to the same genes. A mutation that changed a blood marker might also have helped the immune system recognize certain infections, or influenced how the body handled stress, or affected the way cells communicated with each other. In a system as complex as the human body, small changes can have many consequences at once. That complexity makes it difficult to say exactly why any one blood type exists, but it also explains why the system never became simple. Each variation may have played a role at some point, even if that role isn't obvious today. This idea becomes clearer when scientists compare blood types with other parts of the immune system. The genes that control immune responses are some of the most diverse in the entire human genome. Two people can have very different versions, and that difference can change how their bodies react to the same infection. This diversity isn't a mistake. It's one of the reasons humans have survived so many challenges over time. Blood types fit into that same pattern. They are one piece of a larger system that allows the species to respond to a changing world without everyone reacting the same way. But even with this explanation, there are still details that feel almost too precise to ignore. Certain blood types appear more often in regions where specific diseases were once common. Some rare variations seem to have survived for thousands of years without any clear advantage today. And every so often, a new blood type is discovered that reminds scientists the system isn't completely mapped yet. These details don't mean there is anything supernatural about blood, but they do show how much history can be hidden in something as ordinary as a drop of it. When researchers look at blood types alongside genetics, archaeology, and anthropology, they begin to see a picture of humanity that is more complicated than simple stories about where people came from. Populations have mixed and separated many times. Groups have disappeared, merged, or moved in ways that left only faint traces behind. Blood types are one of those traces. Not a full record, but a clue. A quiet signal that something happened long ago, even if we don't know exactly what. This is why blood type studies were once used to try to understand ancient migrations before DNA analysis became common. By comparing the frequency of blood groups in different regions, scientists tried to reconstruct how people might have traveled across continents. Today, modern genetics gives much clearer answers, but the older studies still show how much information can be hidden in the body. Even without reading the full genome, patterns in blood were enough to suggest that human history was far more complex than anyone first imagined. There were waves of migration that left no written record. There were populations that lived in isolation for centuries. There were contacts between groups that history never described. And the evidence of all of it still exists, quietly carried from one generation to the next. The idea that the body can hold memories of the past in this way has always fascinated people. even before science could explain how it worked. In many cultures, blood was seen as more than just a physical substance. It was connected to family, to identity, to the idea that something inside a person linked them to those who came before. Modern science doesn't describe it in those terms, but in a way, the idea isn't completely wrong. Blood really does carry information from the past, not as thoughts or memories, but as patterns in genes that came from ancestors who lived long before anyone kept records. Those patterns don't tell stories in words, they tell them in chemistry. And the more we learn to read that chemistry, the more we realize how much of human history is written inside the body itself. Blood types are only one part of that story, but they are one of the easiest parts to see. They show that even something as simple as a medical test can connect to events that happened thousands of years ago. They show that the human body is not just a machine, but a living record of everything the species has survived. And they show that the story is not finished. New variations still appear, new patterns are still discovered, new questions keep coming. As we move closer to the end of this journey, the focus shifts from the past to the future, and to the questions scientists continue to ask. Will blood types keep changing? Or have we only just begun to understand what they really mean? When scientists ask whether blood types will continue to change in the future, the answer is both simple and complicated at the same time. In one sense, the process never stops. As long as humans continue to reproduce, small genetic changes will keep appearing. Mutations happen naturally in every generation. Most of them don't affect anything important, and most disappear without anyone noticing. But once in a while, a change survives, and if it spreads through a population, it becomes part of the human story. Blood types are not immune to that process. They have changed before, and there is no reason to think they have stopped changing now. The difference is that the world today is not the same world that shaped the blood types we know. For most of human history, survival depended heavily on the body's ability to fight disease without help. Epidemics could wipe out entire communities, and the people who survived often did so because their immune systems reacted differently. In those conditions, even small genetic advantages could spread quickly over many generations. Today, medicine has changed that balance. Vaccines, antibiotics, and modern treatments mean that people survive illnesses that once would have been fatal. This doesn't stop evolution, but it slows the effect of natural selection in certain areas. Traits that once mattered for survival may not matter as much now, and traits that once caused problems may remain in the population because they no longer prevent people from living long lives. Because of this, the future of blood types may not follow the same patterns as the past. Instead of being shaped mainly by disease and environment, the distribution of blood types may be influenced more by migration and mixing. In the modern world, people travel farther and more often than ever before. Populations that once lived separately for centuries now meet and intermarry regularly. As this happens, the differences between regions slowly become less extreme. Blood types don't disappear, but they spread more evenly. Scientists already see this in large cities, where the variety of blood types is often greater than in rural or isolated areas. Over many generations, this kind of mixing could make the global distribution of blood types more balanced than it was in the past. But that doesn't mean the system will become simple. Even as the main groups spread, new variations can still appear. The genes that control blood markers can change in small ways, creating new combinations that didn't exist before. Most of these changes will stay rare, but some may survive, just as rare types have survived in the past. The human body is not fixed. It never has been. And as long as people exist, the possibility for change remains. Another reason scientists believe blood types may continue to evolve is that the immune system itself is always adapting. Every time a new disease appears, the body responds. Sometimes the response is temporary, happening only within one person's lifetime. But sometimes, over many generations, the response becomes part of the genetic pattern of the population. This has happened before with diseases like malaria, where certain blood traits became more common because they helped people survive. It could happen again if new diseases create pressures that favor some variations over others. The difference now is that modern medicine can interfere with that process. Treatments can protect people regardless of their genetic traits, which means evolution works more slowly, but it doesn't stop completely. Small changes can still accumulate, especially over long periods of time. When scientists look far into the future, they don't expect blood types to disappear, but they do expect the patterns to keep shifting. Some types may become more common, some may become less common, new ones may appear, and the reasons for those changes may not always be obvious. This uncertainty is part of what makes the study of blood types so interesting. It sits at the point where biology, history, and chance all meet. You can see the past in the patterns, but you can also see that the future isn't written yet. The system is still open, still moving, still carrying forward everything that happened before, while leaving space for something new. There is also another reason blood types continue to fascinate researchers, and it has to do with how much of the immune system is still not fully understood. Even with modern technology, scientists are still discovering new markers, new interactions, and new ways the body recognizes itself. The more detailed the research becomes, the more complex the picture looks. What once seemed like a simple classification now looks like a network of signals, each one connected to many others. A change in one marker can affect how the immune system reacts. A change in the immune system can affect how the body handles disease. And those effects can influence which traits survive over time. Blood types are only one part of that network, but they are one of the easiest parts to observe, which is why they often become the focus when people start asking bigger questions about human biology. Questions like why we are different at all, why the body allows so much variation, why the immune system is built to recognize such tiny differences between people, and why those differences have lasted for thousands of years instead of fading away. The answers usually come back to the same idea. Diversity is not a mistake, it's protection. It's the reason a species can survive when the world changes. If everyone reacted the same way, one disease or one environmental shift could affect everyone at once. With variation, the outcome is less predictable, and that unpredictability can keep the species alive even in difficult conditions. Blood types are one of the clearest examples of that principle. They show that the human body carries many versions of the same system at the same time, each one slightly different, each one shaped by history. And when you think about it long enough, it becomes clear that something as ordinary as blood is not ordinary at all. It is a record of survival, a record of adaptation, a record of thousands of years of changes happening quietly, generation after generation. As we get closer to the end of this journey, there is one more part of the story worth exploring, and that is the way blood has always felt important to people, even before science understood what it was. Long before laboratories and genetics, blood was connected to identity, to family, to the idea that something inside us carries the past forward. Modern science explains that in terms of genes and evolution, but the feeling behind it has existed for much longer. And when you look at how much history is really written inside the body, it's easy to understand why people always sensed that blood held secrets, even when they didn't know what those secrets were. Long before scientists understood genes, cells, or the immune system, people already believed that blood carried something important. In many ancient cultures, blood was seen as the essence of life itself, the thing that connected generations, the thing that made someone part of a family, a tribe, or a lineage. The language people used was not scientific, but the idea behind it wasn't entirely wrong. They sensed that something inside the body linked the past to the present, even if they didn't know how. Today, we know that what they were sensing was genetics, not in a mystical way, but in a biological one. Every person carries pieces of the people who came before them, written in DNA, passed down slowly through time. Blood types are one of the ways those pieces show themselves, because the genes that control blood markers come from ancestors who lived thousands of years ago. When you know your blood type, you are seeing a tiny part of a chain that stretches back further than any written record. That idea alone makes blood feel different from most other parts of the body. You can change your hairstyle, you can change your habits, you can even change parts of your health over time. But your blood type stays the same from birth to death because it comes from the genetic pattern you inherited. It's one of the few things about you that connects directly to people you will never meet. People who lived long before your name existed. This connection is one of the reasons blood has always carried symbolic meaning. In many traditions, the idea of bloodline meant more than family. It meant identity, belonging, and continuity. Even without understanding biology, people noticed that traits passed from parents to children, that families shared similarities, and that something invisible linked generations together. Science later explained that connection in terms of genes, but the feeling behind it had been there for thousands of years. Blood types fit into that same idea because they show that not everyone inherited exactly the same pattern. Some variations are common, some are rare, and some appear only in certain parts of the world. Each one reflects a different path through history, a different chain of survival that led to the present. When scientists study those patterns, they are not just looking at medicine, they are looking at human history written in biology. This is why blood type research became important in anthropology long before modern DNA testing existed. By comparing blood groups in different populations, researchers tried to understand how people moved across the planet, how groups separated, and how they came back together again. The results were not always simple, but they showed that the human story was far more complex than anyone once believed. There were migrations that left no written records. There were populations that lived in isolation for centuries. There were contacts between groups that history never described, and the evidence of those events still exists, not in books, but in the body itself. Blood types don't tell the whole story, but they tell part of it, enough to show that the past is never completely gone. It stays hidden in patterns that most people never notice, patterns that only become visible when someone starts looking closely. This idea has always fascinated people, and it helps explain why blood has been connected to so many beliefs over time. Even today, when science explains blood in terms of molecules and genes, there is still a sense that it carries something deeper, something tied to identity and origin. Part of that feeling comes from the fact that blood is one of the few things every human shares, yet it is never exactly the same in every person. We all need it to live, but it still carries differences that remind us we are not identical. Those differences don't make one person better or worse. They just show that the human species has never been uniform. It has always been a mixture of variations, shaped by survival, chance, and time. Another reason blood types feel mysterious is that they show how much information the body can hold without anyone being aware of it. Most people never think about their immune system unless they get sick. They never think about their genes unless they take a test. Yet inside every person is a detailed record of ancestry, adaptation, and biological history, stored in ways that don't need memory or language to exist. The body remembers without knowing. It carries patterns without thinking about them. It passes them on without understanding what they mean. When scientists read those patterns, they see traces of ancient climates, ancient diseases, and ancient migrations. They see evidence of times when survival depended on things no one could see, like how the immune system reacted to a parasite, or how the body handled a new environment. Blood types are one of the clearest examples of this kind of hidden record. They show that the past is not only in books or ruins, it is also in cells, in molecules, in the tiny markers on the surface of red blood cells that most people never notice. And the more we learn to read those markers, the more we realize how much of the human story is still there, waiting to be understood. This doesn't mean blood holds secrets in a mystical sense. It means the body is more complicated than it looks, and history leaves traces in places we don't expect. Every generation carries the result of everything that came before it, even if no one remembers the events that shaped those results. That thought can make something as simple as a blood test feel strangely connected to the past. Not because the blood knows anything, but because it carries the outcome of thousands of years of survival. And when you look at it that way, the idea that blood types exist at all stops feeling random. It starts to feel like part of a long, slow story that is still going. A story that began long before science. A story that continues now, quietly, in every person alive. As we move toward the final part of this journey, the focus turns to one last question that often comes up whenever people think about blood types for long enough. If the human body has changed so much in the past, and if it can still change now, then how much of what we are today is temporary, and how much will still be there thousands of years from now? Because when you start thinking about evolution on that scale, blood types stop looking like fixed categories and start looking like moments in a process that never really ends. When you start thinking about the human body as part of a process instead of a finished design, blood types begin to look very different. Instead of 4 simple categories that have always existed, they become snapshots, small moments in a long chain of changes that started long before modern humans appeared and will probably continue long after we are gone. The system we see today is not the beginning, and it is not the end. It is only the current version. Evolution doesn't work toward a final form. It never has. Every species alive today is simply the result of everything that happened before, shaped by survival, by chance, and by the environment at the time. If the environment changes, the species changes with it. Sometimes the change is visible, like differences in size or appearance. Other times it happens quietly, at the level of genes and cells, where it can continue for thousands of years without anyone noticing. Blood types belong to that quieter kind of change. The differences are small, invisible without tests, but they carry the record of events that mattered to survival. When certain diseases spread, when populations moved, when groups stayed isolated, those experiences left marks in the genetic patterns that control blood. Over many generations, the marks became part of the population, not because anyone planned it, but because the people who carried those traits survived long enough to pass them on. This is why blood types can feel almost like timestamps, showing that the human body has lived through different conditions at different times. Some variations may go back to the earliest migrations out of Africa. Others may have appeared later, when humans began farming and living in larger communities. Some may be even more recent, shaped by epidemics that happened only a few hundred years ago. The body keeps all of those layers at once. It doesn't erase the past. It adds to it. And that means the system we see today is not perfectly balanced or perfectly logical. It is the result of many different pressures acting at different times, sometimes helping, sometimes conflicting, sometimes leaving traits behind long after the reason for them disappeared. This is one reason scientists are careful about assuming that every blood type must have a clear purpose today. Some variations may exist simply because they survived the past, not because they are useful now. Evolution doesn't clean everything up. It works with what is already there, building on it, changing it a little at a time. When you think about it that way, the variety in human blood starts to feel less like a puzzle that needs a single answer, and more like a story that was written slowly, one generation after another. And the story is still being written. Even now, the world is changing in ways our ancestors never experienced. People live longer, travel farther, and mix with populations that were once separated by oceans or mountains. Diseases appear and disappear. Medical technology allows people to survive conditions that would have been fatal in the past. All of these changes affect the conditions that shape evolution, not in obvious ways and not quickly, but over long periods of time. They can shift the balance of traits in a population. Blood types may become more evenly distributed as people mix, or certain variations may become more common if they happen to fit better with new conditions. There is no way to know exactly what the future distribution of blood types will look like. But history suggests it won't stay exactly the same. The system has never stayed still before. Another reason the future is uncertain is that scientists are still discovering how complex the immune system really is. Blood types are only one part of a much larger network of signals that help the body recognize itself. There are thousands of molecules involved in immune responses, and many of them vary from person to person. Some of those differences are known. Others are still being studied. Some may not even be discovered yet. This means the visible blood groups we talk about today may only be the most obvious layer of a much deeper system. As research continues, scientists may find new markers, new variations, or new connections between blood type and other parts of the body. Each discovery adds more detail, but it also makes the picture more complicated. Instead of a simple chart, the system starts to look like a web, with many threads crossing in ways that are hard to follow. That complexity is part of what makes the subject feel mysterious, even when the explanations are scientific. The human body is not built from a few simple parts. It is built from countless small differences working together, most of them invisible until something draws attention to them. Blood types are one of the places where those differences become visible, and once you see them, it's hard not to wonder what else is hidden in the same way. How many variations exist that we never notice? How many traits are quietly passing from one generation to the next without anyone realizing they are there? And how many of those traits come from events so far in the past that no one remembers them anymore? When scientists talk about evolution, they often describe it in terms of survival and adaptation. But there is another way to think about it too. You can think of it as memory, not the kind of memory we experience in our minds, but a biological memory stored in genes, carried forward without words. Every generation inherits the result of everything that happened before. Every body carries traces of environments it never lived in. Every drop of blood contains patterns shaped by people who existed thousands of years ago. Not because the blood remembers them, but because survival left its mark, and the mark never completely disappeared. That idea is one of the reasons the study of blood types never feels finished. Even when scientists understand how the markers work, the bigger questions remain. Why these variations and not others? Why did some survive while others vanished? How many more changes will happen in the future? And how much of what we are today will still exist thousands of years from now? As we move into the final part of this journey, we step back from the details and look at the whole picture. The idea that something as ordinary as blood can connect biology, history, and survival into one long story. A story that began long before anyone could measure it. And one that will keep going long after we stop thinking about it. When you step back and look at the entire story of blood types from a distance, it stops feeling like a small medical detail and starts to feel like part of something much larger. What began as a simple discovery about transfusions slowly turned into a window into human history, then into evolution, then into the immune system, and finally into the idea that the body itself carries records of the past in ways we are still learning to understand. The more scientists studied blood, the more they realized that it reflects almost everything humans have been through. Migration, disease, isolation, survival, chance. Every one of those forces left small changes behind, and those changes became part of the genetic patterns that define blood types today. No single event created the system. It was built slowly, over thousands of generations, shaped by conditions that most people alive now will never experience. And yet the results are still here, inside every person. That is one of the reasons blood types feel different from many other biological traits. They are invisible most of the time, but they matter in ways that connect to life itself. Without the right match, transfusions fail. Without the right immune response, infections spread. Without variation, populations become vulnerable. Something as simple as a marker on a red blood cell can make the difference between safety and danger. And that makes it easy to understand why people have always felt that blood must carry something important, even before science explained what that something was. For most of history, people didn't know about genes or immune systems, but they noticed that family traits passed down through generations. They noticed that certain characteristics stayed within groups, that children resembled parents, and that something invisible connected the living to the past. They called it bloodline. Today we call it genetics. The words changed, but the idea is still the same. The body carries the past forward. Blood types are one of the clearest examples of that idea, because they don't depend on culture, language, or memory. They exist whether anyone knows about them or not. A person can live their whole life without thinking about their blood type, and still carry the result of events that happened thousands of years ago. That quiet connection to the past is part of what makes the subject feel almost endless. Every time science answers one question, another appears behind it. Why did certain blood types survive in some places but not others? Why do rare variations exist at all? Why does the immune system allow so much diversity instead of one perfect design? The answers usually lead back to the same principle. Life survives through variation. A species that never changes cannot survive a changing world. Diversity allows different individuals to react differently to the same threat, and that difference keeps the species alive even when individuals are lost. Blood types are one way that diversity shows itself, a visible reminder that humans have never been exactly the same, even when we look similar on the outside. And the story doesn't end with the past. It continues in the present, and it will continue in the future. Every generation carries new combinations of genes. Every generation lives in slightly different conditions than the one before. Even if the changes are small, they never stop completely. Over long periods of time, those small changes can become patterns, and those patterns can become the next chapter in the story of the human body. Scientists don't know exactly what that future chapter will look like. Blood types may become more evenly mixed as populations continue to move and combine. Rare variations may appear and disappear. New markers may be discovered that we don't even know exist yet. The system may grow more complex, or it may slowly simplify in ways we can't predict. What we do know is that the process that created blood types is still happening. The same forces that shaped the past are still at work, even if we don't notice them. Evolution hasn't stopped. History hasn't stopped. The body hasn't stopped changing. And that means the patterns inside every person today are only one moment in a story that stretches far beyond a single lifetime. When you think about it long enough, something as ordinary as blood starts to feel almost like a timeline. Not a timeline you can read easily, but one written in molecules instead of words. Every marker, every variation, every rare type is part of that record, showing that the human species didn't appear all at once, and it won't stay the same forever. It changed in the past, it is changing now, and it will keep changing long after we are gone. That idea can feel strange at first, but it can also feel strangely calm. It reminds you that the body is not separate from history. It is part of it. Every person alive today carries the result of everything that came before, whether they think about it or not. Blood types are just one example, but they are a clear one. A small detail that leads to a very large story. A story about survival, adaptation, and the quiet ways life keeps going, generation after generation, without ever needing to stop and explain itself. In the final part, we'll slow things down and bring the whole journey to a close, looking at the bigger picture one last time and letting the ideas settle the way they were meant to, slowly, quietly, and without needing to solve every mystery. As we come to the end of tonight's journey, it's easy to forget how simple the subject seemed at the beginning. Blood types sound like one of those things everyone learns once and never thinks about again. A, B, O, positive, negative. Just a few letters, a few labels, something written on a medical form and then pushed out of the mind. But the deeper we drifted into the subject, the more those simple labels opened into something much larger. What looked like a basic medical detail turned out to be part of a long history written inside the human body itself. A history of migrations across continents long before maps existed. A history of diseases that shaped populations without leaving written records. A history of survival, where tiny differences decided who lived long enough to pass their genes to the next generation. Blood types are not memories in the way we usually think of memory, but they are traces. They show that the body keeps a record of the past in ways that don't need language, don't need books, and don't need anyone to understand them for them to exist. Every person alive today carries patterns that began thousands of years ago. Patterns shaped by environments, epidemics, and events that no one living now has ever seen. And yet the result is still here, quietly moving through the bloodstream, every second of every day. The more scientists study blood, the more they see how much variation exists beneath the surface. What once seemed like 4 simple types became dozens of systems. What seemed like fixed categories turned into a network of markers, genes, and signals that interact in ways we still don't fully understand. New variations appear, rare types are discovered, old theories are replaced with new ones. The system never becomes completely finished. It keeps expanding the more closely we look at it. That's one of the strange things about biology. The closer you get to the details, the less simple anything looks. The human body feels solid and familiar, but at the microscopic level, it is full of differences, full of small changes that happened long before we were born. Blood types are one of the few places where those differences become visible, and once you notice them, it's hard not to wonder what else is hidden in the same way. How many traits are quietly passed from generation to generation without anyone realizing? How many patterns inside the body come from events so far in the past that history never recorded them? And how much of what we are today is only temporary, part of a process that will keep going long after we stop thinking about it? Evolution never promised a final version of anything. It only promised change. Every generation is a step, not an ending. The blood types we have now are the result of everything that came before, but they are not the last result. As long as humans exist, the system will keep moving, slowly, quietly, without needing anyone to notice. That idea can feel unsettling at first, but it can also feel strangely peaceful. It means that the human story is bigger than any one lifetime, bigger than any one country, bigger than any one moment in history. Every person carries a piece of that story, even in something as ordinary as their blood. And tonight, we just followed that story for a while. From the discovery of blood groups, to the immune system, to ancient migrations, to rare variations that still surprise scientists today. We wandered through ideas that started in medicine and ended in evolution, and all of it came from something most people never think about twice. Just a few letters, just a few markers, just a drop of blood. If you enjoyed this slow dive into hidden science, quiet mysteries, and the strange details the world usually rushes past, you can support Sleepy Tin Foil Hat by subscribing, leaving a comment, or telling me where you're listening from tonight. I always like seeing how far these late-night stories travel, and it's strangely comforting to know that people all over the world are drifting off to the same thoughts at the same time. For now, though, there's nothing else you need to figure out. No puzzles left to solve, no answers you have to remember. Let the ideas fade the way they naturally do when the mind starts getting heavy. Let your breathing slow down. Let your shoulders drop. Let the thoughts that were moving a moment ago drift further and further into the background. The story will still be there tomorrow. Your blood will still be the same. And the long history inside it will keep going quietly, whether you think about it or not. So rest. Close your eyes if they're still open, and let the night carry you the rest of the way. Good night.